Hi guys, welcome to episode 8
Yes.
of the Change School TV. So today we're going to be talking about career burnout and the road to recovery. So if those of you are joining us live, sitting at your desk having lunch, if you just want to say hi, shoot some waves or like your little palms, introduce yourselves, and if you have any comments or suggestions, feel free to pop them in there. But I guess today, it's a pretty serious topic that has become more and more in the limelight for not only people working, in the corporate world, but for entrepreneurs. So we're addressing it because we've both faced burnout ourselves. And, the road to recovery is varied for each person, and burnout doesn't just happen once, but it can happen multiple times. And the way that burnout happens is really varied to each person. But more and more people are facing career burnout or just burnout in general, because either they are working extensive hours, not necessarily taking care of themselves, or perhaps it can be their perfectionist side, which, makes them work harder and not necessarily smarter. As for others, if you're starting your own business, it can also be because you feel that you need to be constantly working all the time, and actually it ends up being you just working like a hamster in a wheel, going like a hamster in the wheel versus necessarily, doing the right thing. So we're busy being busy, which then causes us to burn out a lot more. And, there's this, I guess, celebritism of hard work, and not necessarily smart work. And that's something that everyone has just been brought up thinking that we need to do hard work, which is, working 24/7, not necessarily just, looking at what is your output, what is your input, and what is your output, and also bearing in mind, like, the road to where you want to get to. So we want to share more about our own experience today, like some of the common triggers or the signs, what the impact was, and then what was like the turnaround and recovery. But more so, I think, is the 3 strategies that we want to share. We obviously talk about things that we've gone through ourselves or experienced either by ourselves or through the work that we do at the Change School. And the 3 tips or strategies is really something that we're going to share, which will help you if you've faced burnout, or are going through burnout, to hopefully recover. So, do you want to maybe share your story a little bit first?
Yeah, sure. So, burnout is definitely something I have experienced at multiple points throughout my career journey. And I think it's interesting when you look back and kind of think about the patterns of behavior, the patterns of thought that you have that can sometimes make you more susceptible to burnout. So I kind of wrote down in my little notes, I guess, sort of 3 main points or moments where I felt a pretty strong career burnout, and that actually had a negative impact on my health or psychology. So one was when I was working in New York. I think there was a time when I was working for an SME, and it was, I was in my 20s, so I was happy to kind of slug it out and work long hours, and it's great. I had a great work environment, so I didn't mind. I was happy to do it, and I was learning a lot and feeling challenged, which is always like a big motivator for me. But what happened was, over a long period of time of continuously doing that and not really pausing at any point to check in and go, how am I doing or feeling, or is this okay? Before I knew it, I ended up getting admitted to the hospital with what started as a sickness evolved into a kidney infection, and then it was really not fun. And I remember from that moment telling myself, okay, I'm not going to let that happen again. And I tried to be more mindful of it. And then a few years later, it actually happened again, this time when I was working for a big corporate company. And again, it was similar, again, looking at the patterns, right? So it was a similar thing of really long hours. And, if I'm really honest with myself, I do have that sort of, especially at that time, I had a very strong sort of perfectionism, overachievement kind of drive. And that can be really good. But if it's to the point that it's detrimental to your health or to your psychological well-being, then it's not good. So for me, at that time, thankfully, I wasn't admitted to a hospital. Nothing physical happened. It was more of an emotional breakdown where, I lost confidence and I lost really a sense of purpose and I lost my sense of self. And that can take a lot of energy from you. And sometimes we don't think about this idea of energy, right? And how that can impact us if we are exhausting ourselves on a day-to-day basis for a very long period of time. And then the third time, I guess, was not as long ago. And I think it was, in a way, some similar patterns happening again. This inability, this was during entrepreneurship, so now it wasn't a company, right, that I was working for, it's while I'm working for myself. And I think entrepreneurship, I always say, is probably one of the most, I guess it's such a journey of discovering yourself. You learn so much about yourself as a person, as a professional, etc. And I think the key learning there was, this inability to create boundaries, right? Because especially when you're working for yourself, it's that whole thing, right? Time is money and there's always more work to be done. And Grace made such a good point about, it's not about working hard. I think especially with entrepreneurs sometimes, or even corporate professionals, we kind of wear this badge of busyness as if it's something to be proud of. But there's a whole wave now of, talking about productivity, and sometimes it's misconstrued because we think, oh, it's about doing more. But it's actually about doing less, but having more output, like you said, right? So working more smart. And then it's also so important to just create those healthy boundaries for yourself, whether it's with regards to your relationship and having time for that, or if it's about creating time just to be with yourself, or self-care, or even just, having that mind expansion space so that you can think more or be more creative or even learn something for yourself. So I think it's just from those sharings, I guess the main thing is, thinking about your own patterns of behavior and your patterns of thinking, and how can you sort of adapt that, and how can you protect yourself. And even if you're not at a point of career burnout, how can you already start to be proactive about being more holistic in your daily life and thinking about how do you sort of make time for multiple things, not just your work. Okay.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good, thing. Like just recently I read an article about, that there isn't one purpose. And I've been a huge believer that everyone is like multidimensional in so many ways, right? So we have different things that we enjoy and that feed us. And so often we forget about the different things that feed us. So, that when we're focused on one thing 100%, we tend to overwork ourselves to try and get as much done on that one particular thing. But if you don't feed the other parts of yourself, then that's where you're going to burn out, not necessarily just because you're doing too much, but maybe it's just you're doing too much in that one area.
Yeah.
So for me, I've had probably like 2 or 3 different occasions for burnout, but I know that I'm the type of person that likes to do multiple things. So I like to wear multiple hats, and I like to do multiple things that feed the different parts of myself. And sometimes, or in particular case, self-care about like, maybe taking more time out for myself is something that tends to be set in the last priority. But for me, the other things feed me, whether it's like doing different projects or whether it's like, going to certain sort of conferences or events or different things that allow me to continue growing and learning. Those things feed me, and those things help to, I guess, not burn me out. But when I'm solely focused on one thing and just working constantly on that and not having white space to learn or to grow or to do certain things that allow me to explore the other side of me that's interested in so many different facets of things, whether it's just reading or whether it's like, connecting with a group of like-minded other individuals or online and checking things out, certain things drive me or help me to, I guess, reconnect with myself, as well as obviously time for reflection and meditation and all of those sort of things, right? So I think for me, the burnout was once when I was working for in Australia, and it was a small company, but everyone was working constantly, and the motivation and the drive was there. But again, I think at that point I wasn't taking enough consideration for my health, so then I started to do a lot more yoga. And, I've always been one to, I guess, go back and forth with the health side. So doing yoga, then like going on like healthy eating and all of this sort of stuff. But it's never been something that's 100% consistent. But at that time, that really is what's triggered me to then start doing yoga. And now it's really more something that I've continued with. The second burnout was probably, after, my father died, because I was so caught up in trying to run the business, as well as then taking care of the family matters, as well as like handling my own emotional, situation or the feelings that I was feeling. So it was like my identity, the work-client relationships that I had to manage at that time, and then the family relationships that I had to manage at that time, as well as the expectations of, okay, Grace is usually the one in the family that takes care of most of the things in regards to maybe the legal or whatever matters it was. So there was a lot of pressure at that time. And at that time, I think for me, I didn't really want to let my clients down because, I'd be working all night. And even when my dad was really sick, I'd be up on the night shift. But then I'd be working in the morning and doing things. And I'd be using Boomerang to email people at like certain times. And I think that really then caught up. But it was only, and this is something I've realized, maybe even with Soul sometimes, right? It's like when you stop, that's when you get sick. Right? So it's only when you really have a moment to like go away or hi days. It's really when you have a moment to go away from your current situation or your space, or you take a breathing room, or, go away on a holiday. That's when you sort of break down in a sense. Your body breaks down, right? You start getting sick maybe, or you start, for me, I always find that when I'm at that point of near, not even burnout, but really like my body just needs a break, that's when I get sick. I know that I'm either not getting enough sleep, or I'm not eating healthy enough, or maybe I'm drinking too much coffee, or whatever it is, right? And it's usually those times that I start reassessing what's going on. And I think it's really good to do that on a regular basis, because burnout happens in like 100% or smaller percentages as well. So someone could be burnt out incrementally each week, or every weekend, because they might work their ass off, but then party really hard Friday to Saturday, right? And then Sunday they're just like hanging out, vegging on their thing. And that might be a common feeling for them, but they don't realize that that's actually leading up to a potential burnout as well. So I think the level of burnout is so different. And at every point, it's just checking in with yourself and understanding like what's making you feel this way or working this way, right? So for us, it's like, I think even for the Change School, we've kind of gotten to a point where it's like, how do we create something that is a life by design, that allows us to have a small but mighty team, but allows us to still have the different aspects or facets of our life that we want to incorporate, and that feeds us, rather than this need to like go massively and scale and like raise all this money and right? Like I think we're also going through that point now with like Change School 2.0.
For sure. And it takes a lot of courage, I think, to be that honest with yourself about, well, one, like all your interests, right? Like you said, having these multiple interests. And I think sometimes we become so caught up in, maybe our professional titles or the expectation that comes with that we then kind of obsess and like you said, right, just put everything into one direction, which is why I guess even with everything that we do in our programs, we're always focusing on this idea of not even work-life balance as much as a whole life, right, a holistic life. And I think even with our current career course, some of our students initially were probably like, okay, why are we talking about what I want from my lifestyle when I'm trying to, build or plan my career? Well, because if you have that advantage in a way of when you're in transition, it's kind of an opportunity to reset, right? And think ahead and go, okay, before I jump into something, let me take a moment to think about all those things, right? And that's also another example of that preventive care, right? Preventive action, so that you're thinking ahead rather than waiting till you get sick or waiting till things hit the fan and then trying to fix things then, which is so much harder. And the last point I just want to add to something Grace said too is, that whole mind-body connection. I guess that's why both of us love yoga so much. Or just, even for me, I tend to be quite into, different types of physical activity because there is such a mind-body connection, and there are simple signs that we ignore so often, when we're feeling tired or when we're physically drained or when we're sick.
Yeah.
Or, all of these are not just, I guess, things that happen. They're actually signals in a way to what's going on. And if we take a moment to kind of listen to that and do something about it, then that's really that sort of healthy living, right? And conscious living in a sense. It's not just all the physical stuff.
So maybe just because I know there's a few people on here watching us live, if anyone's gone through burnout, you can just raise your hand.
Yeah.
And if you maybe feeling that you are going through burnout, I think it's such a trend topic at the moment, but there's not enough really honest discussion still going around.
Totally, yeah. People don't talk about it enough. We're always talking about the good stuff,
exactly,
right? And it's always and that's great, but I think there's a lot to be shared, and there's a lot of value to be taken when we can also just kind of step up and say, hey, I'm, struggling, or I'm having a bad day, or, I'm not really sure what this feeling or this rut I'm in is all about, and reaching out to someone who can help. Hi, Daryl.
And I guess it's that thing, right, just to go back about the time, it's people place value or such weight on time. That if you're in the office, you've got to be there from 8 a.m. or whatever it is to 8 p.m. to prove that you are being productive, right? If you're an entrepreneur, it's who knows, if you've maybe got an investment or all these other things, sometimes that pressure is not only from yourself, but from the sort of structure that you've created, right? And it's super cool to be working all night long. And I mean, I think each to their own, as long as there are some times where I enjoy work and I love what I do, right? So for me, sometimes work isn't work, but I just need to know when to switch off, and also when to be able to take time out for my own mental sanity, right? Because the more that I can take space away from what I'm doing, the more creative and the more ideas I will come up with in order to move the business or the things that we're stuck on better, right? But we never let that space happen. So, I think when it comes down to burnout, it's really just being able to ask for help. And this also is a big topic with regards to mental health.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I think those two are so correlated that it's something that we need to have more people talking about. So if you've gone through it, feel free to just raise your hand and make a comment in the box, or you can email us at hello@thechangeschool.com and share your story. We're always looking to hear from other people who have gone through their own burnouts. If you're joining in, just say hi. It'd be great to sort of hear from those of you that are watching us live.
And so I guess before we dive into the 3 tips, I just want to draw your guys' attention as well to the worksheet of the day, because kind of like we were saying, sometimes you don't really know if you're burning out and you're not necessarily able to read the signs. And so the worksheet we have today is kind of like a DIY diagnostic and treatment page. So it's just a few simple things that you can it's like a checklist. You can have a look and see, if anything applies to you. Do you have those symptoms? And then we've also included just some simple actions you can start to take to either avoid burnout from getting worse, or to avoid it completely, or if you're in a more sort of critical point of burnout, then maybe some of those, hopefully some of those suggested actions can help. And then we've got a few more.
Yeah, so our 3 strategies or tips, right, for you if you're sort of going through career burnout. The first is identify the source. And this isn't always easy to do because it can be something that's built up over time. And when you ask yourself the question, what is it that's making me feel this way? It's always top level that we tend to get to first, right?
Yeah.
So sometimes you might want to work with someone else who can ask you the questions and sort of dig a little bit deeper. But, certain symptoms of burnout is obviously chronic exhaustion, or just feeling like you have no energy, or that your mind is like foggy, right? Like sometimes, you know, you can be walking around like you're in a cloud or you're in a daze. And maybe you're lacking motivation. And that doesn't always mean burnout. It can also mean that sometimes you're just maybe not in the right job or doing the right thing or the right whatever. But a lot of the times it usually is like a telltale sign for you that you are getting to some point of burnout. So where you're feeling physically exhausted, mentally exhausted, you know, you're just not having the same energy levels that you would usually have. And maybe your spouse will say that, or maybe your friends are saying it, or maybe you go out with your friends and you're just not feeling that sense of like, I want to connect with people, right?
Excitement, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
You know, and I think it's like, how do you try and take like that magnifying glass and really examine all the different aspects of your current situation, and see which parts are not suiting you or like, I guess, helping you, or which are adding more stress or strain to you, right? So it's like, is it work, or is it more relationships, or is it something else, right? Insecurities, or what is it that's getting you to that point? And I guess for, you know, the sooner that you can diagnose yourself, the better that you can, you know, take control, right, of the situation. And the better that you can monitor yourself as you're sort of moving through each day to manage yourself and the situation so that you don't get to the point of complete burnout, right? So just remember, though, that like every challenge, there's an opportunity. And I think the opportunities, you know, we always tend to forget and we always look at the negative side. But the opportunity is for us to reassess and reframe the way that we're doing something, as well as to create new routines and rituals. And, you know, that doesn't have to be forever. You know, for myself, I change my routines or rituals every 6 months. And now that I have a child, I mean, it changes again, right? So I think it's just bringing awareness to your current situation and ensuring that you are inspecting every part of your situation, and really taking note, maybe writing and monitoring yourself over a week and seeing what actions or what things are triggering the feeling of you know, unmotivation, right? If that's such a thing, or the feeling of maybe cloudiness in your mind and the making you demotivated, right? So I think that's really the first step, is how do you identify the source of where this, you know, sadness or heavy weight or cloud is coming from.
Yeah, exactly. And in parallel, right, so I guess these strategies aren't necessarily like step 1, step 2, step 3. They're just kind of things to think about as you go through your day, right, or maybe as you're journaling. But the second one is to think about like your positive sources of energy. And I think this is, again, something, you know, we just don't tend to think about it, right? We tend to go through the motions of our daily lives and we hang out with the same people and we always stick with what's familiar without necessarily thinking about how good or positive it is for us, right? So I think when you're thinking about work, really take a moment to ask yourself, what do you love most about what you do? What activities do you do that you could continue to do forever if there was no time constraint, right? Or what are those things when you have no time constraint that you choose to do? What are the things you enjoy to work on? What are the things that kind of make you feel supercharged and challenged in a positive way? And when you look at your relationships, you know, it's really about who are the people that uplift you? Who are the people who give you a positive source of energy, that are cheering you on, that are challenging you to be better and helping you and supporting you all along the way. Because on the flip side, there's also toxic people, obviously, but even our friends sometimes, I mean, if we're not really selective and reflective about it, you don't always stop to think about, you know, are all your relationships, you know, helping you to succeed, enabling you to go through life in a more positive and uplifted way, or are they the ones who are always sort of bringing you down, or, you know, maybe bringing a type of unhealthy competitiveness that isn't doing something for you, isn't doing something that gives you positive mental space, right? And then also just thinking about sort of health and well-being, like we've been talking about, right? How can you recharge yourself? And what do you need to do to sort of get that energy back for yourself? And it's all kind of linked to everything we've been saying, right? Like carving out that time, and maybe for you it's a walk, or maybe it's listening to music, or taking a dance class, or just creative writing. But I think it's important to be aware of those things that give you that positive energy, and then really try to create more room and time for those things around your daily, routines and what you're doing for work. And then last but not least is also like lifestyle, right? So really thinking about what are the things that are positive for you physically, mentally, psychologically. And, I think particularly in Singapore, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we tend to observe this big pattern because everyone's working so hard and maybe doesn't have that outlet to kind of, recharge, or hasn't taken the time to think about how do I recharge, or how do I get that positive energy, or even just carve time for myself. So often we're seeing, I live near Robertson Quay, so it's just a strip of restaurants and bars, and all I see sometimes is just people binge eating and binge drinking, Monday through Sunday. And there's nothing wrong with having fun, obviously. But it is kind of questioning a little bit, positivity is one of the keys. Thank you. So true. But yeah, it really is just sort of thinking about, the why behind everything we do, the why behind our activities. And if it's just for enjoyment and letting your hair loose, go for it, But if it's something that is this perpetual pattern and almost like this, I don't know, for lack of a different outlet or a lack of a way to just process or to let your mind kind of switch off, right, then is there something else that you can do that might be healthier for you or better for you or help you to move forward, as opposed to kind of just maybe not having a healthy impact, right?
Or not maybe, I think a lot of that stuff, right, is when we're not addressing the situation.
Totally,
so,
yeah, exactly, like an escapism
exactly,
kind of thing. Yeah,
right?
totally.
So, it's one of those things that I think because we live here, and that, like Sol was saying, it's like everyone does have the week where they work, and maybe they have their party nights or whatever it is, right? And everyone goes through it. It's not like we haven't, so we're not saying that we're better than anyone else. But it's that thing that a lot of the times, and I've gone through that, I think, when I wasn't wanting to face a certain situation. So, I would work all week and then party on the weekend, and then, or I would travel to get out of Singapore, and I would just be meeting people all the time. So I wasn't actually creating that time for myself. And I think another thing, like just to talk about relationships, right? Like I'm such a huge believer of taking time out for yourself by yourself, right? So not for me, it's not so much just being at home by myself. It's not as easy right now because I have a little baby. But for me in the past, it was like I would always go away for a weekend or more, whether it's just to like Bali or somewhere else, or even to my house in Jakarta or my parents' house in Jakarta, but that I would take time for myself, just for me. And, I think it's just being mindful of those things, because when we're in a relationship, whether it's work relationship or work, with a spouse, we often lose our sense of self. And we forget about the things that we need to do for ourselves. And we do these things like partying on the weekend, or even in Singapore, it's so easy for a lot of people, and I see this happen with a lot of friends that we know, where they work their asses off all week, and then they travel every weekend. They have the entire year booked of travels, right? And that's fine. But at the same time, it wears you out over time. There's only so much that you can do without slowing down and pausing. And I think slowing down and pausing is essential, and, creating that, again, it's white space, so you can just waste time and zone out. I think we need to zone out more and waste time more, so that we're not always just moving. And unfortunately, I sometimes say I'm really busy, when actually I'm just busy with myself. And I feel that sometimes when you say you're busy, people, or if you say you can't make it on a certain date, or you can't do something, there's the pressure that people are like, wait, how come you can't hang out? Or why can't you do? Actually, I'm just busy taking care of myself and hanging out with myself, and not having I think being okay with that.
Yeah,
right?
I was just going to say, it's amazing sometimes I feel that some people are actually afraid to be with themselves. And there's this fear of what if I get bored or what am I going to do? And it's, again, that whole mindset of you constantly have to be doing something. You could do nothing.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of truth that can come out if we can learn to sit with ourselves sometimes and be in the quiet and not be stimulated, by our phones or by, distractions, and not have an agenda. Maybe you have some big epiphany or maybe you don't. And I don't think it matters so much, it's not about going into that space with some kind of absolute outcome that you need, but it's more about just being.
Yes, totally.
Which brings us to our third point.
So our third point is unplug. And, I think, look, it's something that we both had difficulty with in the past. And I think sometimes still do, right? Because we're just used to, I'm on my phone a lot, right? I just don't necessarily respond to things all the time, right? But, it was my savior when I was breastfeeding or all the time, right? But I think that, how can we unplug and remove distractions, or digital distractions as well? So really, I think it's not only from the digital space, but just unplugging from your work in general, right? So having that space to disconnect from what it is that you're doing, because when you actually do that, you're more likely to see other perspectives that can connect to what it is that you're doing. So sometimes when you're constantly in your work and when you're just doing work all the time, you actually forget that maybe the problem you have, the solution is in the problem, right? Yeah. That's a common thing. But we're not able to see it because we're so focused on the current, task or activity that we need to do.
Tunnel vision.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
So by unplugging, it allows you, to see pictures or see things in a different way and connect the dots slightly differently. So, a lot of the times, entrepreneurs usually tend to be type A, overachievers, that sort of stuff. And we are those people, so it's not like we're,
no
again,
judging.
we are all of those things.
Yeah.
We've been through it. We are still going through it, and we will always be fighting that for the rest of our lives unless we decide to be a beach bum, which is not on the cards. But yeah, I think it's important to understand taking time off is not just necessarily a nice thing to do, it's a necessity. And taking time out, like I said, to waste time as well, right? Just to zone out. And for anyone that's striving to do more with their work or with their life or whatever it is, it's I think removing yourself from your day-to-day environment and your day-to-day tasks is really essential. And I think as long as your bigger vision is there, and that vision can change as well, we don't need to rush to get there, right? I mean, we need to take the right steps, and sometimes we won't. It's just human nature. We're going to take things the wrong way, and then we're going to learn from it. But it's about knowing when to slow down and go, okay, I have done what I can right now. Okay, now what? What can I reassess? What can I reflect on? How can I do things better, right? So it's not a marathon. I mean, it's a marathon, right? It's not like a sprint. So you can do little sprints, but I think it's essential to know that you can get there eventually, and you will get there eventually, right? So it's about how can you be slow and steady. Slow and steady wins the race, right?
Totally.
We're just so eager to constantly be doing things super fast to get to the finish line.
And if I can just interject, actually, what is the finish line, though?
Exactly.
Exactly.
I
mean, at the end of the day, once you hit your finish line, you've got a new one, right? And the ultimate finish line is when we're under the ground. So one way to kind of think about it is, what are you actually rushing for and towards, right? And if we only have one life, #YOLO, then how do you want to go through it, right? And what is that experience going to be like for yourself?
Exactly.
Right?
And I think, these are questions that we've all been, going through multiple times, right?
Yeah.
And as you run your own business, it's also how do you find the way that you can work whilst things change around you as well, right? Mm-hmm. So I think it's how can you manage your time and your energy efficiently? And we're not going to do it 100%. So we're not saying that that's what you should do, but it's about aiming for that, right? And aiming to manage your energy and your time better. And, it's about, yes, working smarter, but what does that mean for you? What does working smarter mean, right? Because it's not about not putting in the hard yards. Definitely. Like, life isn't meant to be easy necessarily. There's always going to be ups and downs. But, it's also being able to know, like, where you're putting that time and energy, but more so why you're putting that time and energy in there. Exactly. And as you're working on your own business or in your career, it's also like, is this fulfilling? And I think that's something that we've always talked about in any of our different episodes, right? And, how do you then create these boundaries and test the boundaries? If you don't know what boundaries are going to work for you, just test them. Try it out and see whether that's something that today or this next month is going to work. And if it doesn't, change it, tweak it. Listen to other people and what are the boundaries that they've created. How have they carved that time out for themselves, right? Or get inspiration from people such as, even Tim Ferriss or whatever.
Hi, and Paulina.
And see, how have they've interviewed, Tim Ferriss is a perfect example. He's interviewed so many different people to look at the way that they've created structure and boundaries and routines and, take inspiration from that, right? That's what we do all the time. But, use your, hey Hamish, use your resources to the best of your ability and try and take time out to map out your time out, right?
Exactly.
I think that's like the crazy thing, but it's really true. And, just know that you can burn out multiple times and that it's just about how do you either prevent it. And if you do burn out, again, I'm sure one of us will too again, right? No matter what we try, it always happens. But it's also about how do you bounce back from that burnout? And how do you try and make sure you have the right people around you? I think that's so essential.
Hi, Letitia. Thanks for offering to share your story. We're going to check in with you on that because I do think, and actually that was just the thought, sorry, I know.
No.
Just the thought that was going through my head that I just want to leave with you guys with as well is, again, just emphasizing like that importance of helping each other, we really need to, I think, drive the change in this respect, insofar as like helping each other to rise, right? It's all great and fine if you're doing amazing in your life, but what about the person next to you? What about your coworker? What about someone in your family? If they're going through something, they're probably feeling isolated and not sharing or probably lacking the tools for what to do. So,
I think like positivity is essential, but at the same time, like sometimes we're too focused on like being positive all the time that we feel that we can't be honest about how we're feeling. So, most of the time if someone asks you how you're feeling, you're not going to be like, oh, I'm feeling shit today. Because the person's going to be like, oh, wow, okay. How often do you actually tell the person that asks you how you're feeling? Right? So I think if we can change the language and change the conversations that we're having with people to be a lot more like real and authentic. And also, if that's not possible, then it's probably about finding people that you can converse with on that level.
Exactly.
Totally.
I
think we're huge supporters of surrounding yourself with people who have energy that's going to help you and that you can also help. So it's not just like take, but there's a lot of negative energy around from people in general, right? Totally. And that just bogs you down, right? So surround yourself with that right system. And thanks, Letitia, for sharing.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I think we're going to get a few stories from different people who have gone through career burnout because it is something that we see a lot.
Totally.
And in our online course, people are kind of really emotionally, mentally burning out sometimes, right? So I think just a couple of final tips. Like Sol said, right? Like
so we've got our worksheet, and then as always, 2 days later. So what are we on? Tuesday. So tomorrow we will have a blog recap up. Or a recap of this episode on our blog, and then you can download the worksheet from there as well. Just to mention again our online course, because if you're really at that sort of ultimate point of career burnout and maybe you have internally or publicly decided it's time to make a move and to start exploring other opportunities, then definitely get on our wait list. Hi, Minnie Mama! Definitely get on our wait list for our next intake, which is coming up definitely before the end of the year. Or just reach out to us if you want to know more about it. Also our change planner, so everything kind of connects, right? The change planner is really, we don't talk about burnout in there, but it's really such an amazing tool to help you do exactly what we've been talking about, right? Is looking at that full life that you want. What is the lifestyle? What are the key areas in your life? And then how do you build around it and create those rituals and habits, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I think, as always, we have a ton of tools and resources, and just use us to the best of your ability to, get all the resources or tools that we can give you. There's a few other things that are going to be coming up later on that we'll be able to share as we, launch certain things, like whether it's mini courses or whatever. So we will constantly be trying to add value to, each of you as much as we can. And as always, if there's something really that you want us to cover, just let us know, and we'll do our best to do that, especially as we're going to probably start mapping the first quarter of next year.
Yes.
For content. So, send us all your ideas, everything that you have.
Totally, yeah.
But, I think most importantly, we just really hope that today's topic has helped to at least shed some light on our own experiences and, the good and the bad, as well as some tools or tips that can help you. And I think the worksheet will really assist in just taking out a bit more, from your head, right? So really being able for you to put it down on paper. And I think the other thing to end with is really just to remember to tune into yourself. We are so busy tuning into what everyone else thinks about us, right? And about what you're doing.
Yeah.
I think it's just letting go of that and being able to hone in on yourself and what you are feeling right now, and try and carve out that white space or waste space, and replenish yourself, because if we can't replenish ourselves, we just won't be living our life to our maximum potential, or even to the most energy, right?
Or just sustaining ourselves,
exactly,
right? Yeah.
Yeah. So next week we're going to talk about creating your side hustle. I think that's an interesting topic for so many people. So if you are free next Tuesday, 12:30, join in. Otherwise, you'll be able to catch the replay anyways. Yeah. Don't forget to download your worksheet. And thanks, guys, for watching us on your Tuesday afternoon.
Yep.
All right. Have a great one.
See you guys.
See you.